Hey, in this episode, I'm talking to a guy called Nathan George. Nathan is a local artist in Southeast Queensland, but he's a great jazz player as well, great guitarist, and he's spends his time, love his time teaching, and he's very enthusiastic about what he does about teaching. And I think that music education to young people is vital. So that's what our chat's about. If you're a parent looking at getting your kids involved in music, Nathan has some good feedback for you. I do have to give you a warning that Nathan was, when he was recording, we had storms over us and the Wi Fi wasn't very good. And there's some really funky sounds that sound like someone's burping or farting quite often when he's talking. And I should have said we re-recorded, but hey, he's a busy guy and he took the time to make it. So I still want to put it up there so you can see. Ignore the sound crazy bits or have a laugh at them, whatever you want to do. But I hope you get something out of this episode. Once again, if you are enjoying what I'm talking about, subscribe to this channel on YouTube so I can let you know when new episodes come up. If you've got a great story to tell, or even a really small, ordinary story to tell, but it's about being a local artist, email me, aussielocalandlive@gmail.com. Finally, if you want to help out, I'd really appreciate, I'm trying to market this thing and you got to spend money on these platforms to market it. And if you'd like to help out, put your phone on the QR code there. It will take you to my website where you go to tip jar. That money goes directly to me, which will be spent on this program, etc., etc., etc. Nathan's a funky dude. Hope you enjoy the chat. Friends, I'm talking to Nathan George today. Nathan's a musician, a great guitarist, a guy who's a jazz musician, has covered all the stuff on the live thing, gigs as well. But spending his recent years, as he just mentioned, doing a lot of teaching. And thanks for having a chat today. It's one of the things I'd like to look at is, obviously we'll talk a bit about what got you into music, but then have a look at, what's happening in the teaching world, the future of kids coming through and everything else. But mate, what is your background with music? How'd you get into it?
Probably my nan exposed me really young to a lot of classical music. It was the three Bs, Brahms and Bach and Beethoven, a lot of that kind of music. I started guitar when I was 9 with a guy called Ron Samuels, and he was more of an old school kind of teacher. Got me reading music early on, and good ground in just good solid technique, fundamentals, heavy on that, and some of the old books, the Mel Bay books and all that kind of stuff. Guitar wise, probably he was a big Tommy Emmanuel fan, so that was late 80s onwards.
Okay. And mate, was sort of like, would you say that jazz or rock is your main thing? What's your main? Where would you place yourself primarily?
Probably early high school. I kind of started getting right into the old jazz guys, the guitar players.
There's something making a bit of a grunting noise. That sounds like a stool or something. Is your stool something making? There's just something making a bit of like a noise. Like I don't know if it's something moving under the camera or it's like a grunting noise. It sounds like there's chairs moving or something.
How's that? Is that better?
Yeah, I'm not hearing it now. Just talk.
Okay. I think my amp was on.
Okay, cool.
That would have been my amp.
I'll just edit all that out, obviously.
Yep,
so let's go back to mate, how would you class yourself mainly as more of the jazz style or rock influence? Like what's your sort of, where would you place yourself?
Very, very broad. Kind of, I was born in 1980. I kind of grew up in the 90s grunge era. I loved a lot of the 80s shredders, Poison and Extreme and Van Halen and that kind of guitar-driven kind of stuff. But yeah, through probably 14 or 15, maybe a bit earlier, I got into guys like Wes Montgomery, Herb Ellis, Joe Pass, those kind of guys. Benson's later stuff. Benson had a book album called Cookbook, just beyond my anything that I'd ever heard. So I kind of started studying that. Barry Morton was the teacher of mine. He was the head guy at the conservatorium for years, so I had him as a teacher for about 10 years. And basically all those kind of players And the horn players, obviously, you know, Bird
Yeah.
and, you know, Coltrane and Miles and all those kind of players. You know, the piano players, Bill Evans and Monk and all that kind of stuff. I just liked it. I like the abstract kind of, you know, just, yeah, got my
So,
ears.
so what led
Caught
you
my
to the
ears more than
teaching
anything else.
world? What led you to the teaching world?
Well, one of my teachers was Shane Brown. That's who I met Barry Morton through. That was about about 95, and I was a student of him and Barry mainly, and I was too young to kind of go to do the whole uni thing, but I did in '96. I did a certificate 3, I think it was, at Moreton Bay music thing, cert 3 in music,
Yep.
and that covered a lot of areas from recording to songwriting to sound and lighting to, you know, some of the things on that. There was a subject called live work, and I think over the 12 or 2 year, a while ago, of course, I had to do some work experience. So I did some work experience at some studios, just doing some, you know, playing and a bit of that. And Brownie offered me just to come and watch teaching, which I hadn't really thought about. But I just took a couple of his students, and he just let me teach the rest of his students. And then he offered me a job at the end of that day. I was maybe 16, so I was, not to talk it up, but I was pretty knowledgeable. I was a bit of a geek in terms of, you know, the ins and outs of playing guitar and everything. So I started teaching for him for a couple of years, and that was nearly 30 years ago.
Cool, man. There's still some funky sounds going on there. I don't know what it is, but we won't worry about it because we won't go real long, but I want to get the story with it. Mate, when I was talking to you the other day about having a chat, you were really excited about some of the artists, some of the kids you had coming through and the stuff they were doing and how they were just kind of shining.
Yeah.
And the main thing I wanted to talk to you about was there's a lot of negativity around at the moment with where the music industry's at, what's happening with it, you know, change of AI and everything else. But I'm seeing so much great young talent around the place, all over the place. From a teacher's perspective, are kids still as passionate as they were about music? And what do you see happening, and where do you encourage them to go in the future with it?
Oh, so I mean, there's always talent. There always has. There always will be. But especially, I mean, I don't just teach, you know, young students. I have, you know, across the board. But I think just having music in your life and not having an early goal as to say that this is going to be my career. I'm going to, you know, I'm going to make all this money and it's going to be a full-time thing. I just think having music in your life. Playing an instrument, learning, you know, it's a history lesson, you know, it's very mathematically, you know, based. It's an art. It covers a lot of areas. You know, it builds confidence. It builds, you know, creativity, you know, perseverance. You know, you're learning to play and get up on stage and playing in front of people. It just builds good people, I think. So, you know, when they want to go on to study, I'm not hugely leaning on, you know, go and do a 4-year course and, you know, go get a bachelor in whatever it is. I think just having it in your life, and if it becomes a career, albeit, but yeah, it is tough now, as you know, gigs are not like they used to be, but you know, technology's freaks me out a little bit, how fast it's moving. Me as a teacher, I really still like pen and paper, and I'm not kind of leaning into, you know, a lot of the apps and things that kind of kids or anybody gets into. Pick up your guitar.
Do you find too, like I find so many times you'll be doing a gig or something and parents are there for their kids, and little kids just absolutely love music from day one. And obviously as that goes through, I always found that music had all the benefits you're talking about as far as social skills go, as far as confidence, as far as thinking on your feet, all those things.
Totally.
Do you see a clear advantage to the kids you're teaching over, you know, other kids that aren't doing it in the school?
100%, 100%. I see them grow super
Yeah.
quick, like within, a first few lessons of, a question that I ask every student. I'll ask you, name me three bands, Nick. Just three bands off your head.
So I say that again. It just cut out. Name three bands.
Name me three.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's my question
Okay.
that I ask everybody.
Beatles, Pearl Jam, and the Doobie Brothers.
Yeah, and you get kids, and you kind of, especially now, they kind of go, "What do you mean band?" Like their bands aren't like what we kind of thought. Usually, when you ask a kid a band, they'll say that they might say the Beatles, and Queen, and Deep Purple,
from that era.
They usually won't kind of mention. I mean, I couldn't mention. I could, but three current bands would definitely be, probably pre-90s for most people, including, teenage kids.
So, as far as like any parents watching this and their kids are coming through, in the early stages of music development, have you found any particular instruments that they tend to excel in more, or they tend to get more benefits from?
I would always recommend, probably, I mean, if I had 10 years to build, a well-rounded student, from an early age, I think, guitar would be maybe 9 or 10 is a good age. If you're looking at like 5 or 6 year olds, I'd always recommend piano. You're learning to read, you're learning bass clef, treble clef, you're learning harmony, you're learning, 10 fingers, 88 keys, not little sore fingers on the, fingertips. And I definitely recommend piano as even if you don't play, if piano is not your instrument, I think you should play the piano just as if you're a singer, learn the piano. If you're a drummer, learn the piano. But if you're coming up, as I said, from the ages of 5, 6, and 7, probably piano, and then maybe some kind of percussion, drums, develop that sense of time, internal metronome, and singing. Probably singing even before piano. If you're looking at kids, 3 or 4, they're always singing anyway. So encourage vocals to be part of your kids' development in music. So probably early singing, and maybe even a form of dance or something, some kind of movement. Kids learn through movement, and then piano, and then guitar. I encourage them to read, and that's, as a guitar player, it's not a really strong area. We have tab and everything, which I'm not a fan of, because you're not really learning what the music is. So piano is encouraged.
What, frozen up there?
Just said.
There we go. You're back.
Is that all right? Back? We're back. Okay. Yeah. So and then as a guitar player, I recommend the most important thing beyond, even apart from playing an instrument, is just listening to music. Learning about music, learning about the history of music, and trace it back to the great composers, Mozart and all these, as kids, and then get them all through the idea of not just what's current, whatever, just music. Learn to listen to music and learn to appreciate all kind of music. You're never gonna, like all of it, but just find out what you don't like too. Maybe country and western's not your thing, but
it is freezing up a few times. I think the weather we got around us is playing up at the moment.
That's probably something.
Yeah, a bit of a funky sound going on. I will make a mention of it early, a little thing before I start, because it's just so people know that we're having that little issue. But I still want to go on, if that's all right with you, because I agree very much with what you're saying, that I only learnt basic piano, but I do think, looking back now, that pianos, you get a much wider grasp of theory in it, or what you do with piano. With guitar, you tend to be learning more patterns and positions and shapes that you kind of memorize across the neck, more than the piano, more opened up. And then when you get into, the first thing I learned at school was actually, I had double bass and bass guitar, and you do get a limited theory with some of those instruments that are very much one note at a time structured. You get a lot more with harmony through pianos and everything. I always say to people too, with kids and singing, we kind of encouraged our kids to just sing their hearts out until they were like about 16 or 17, and then get some proper training when their voices are developed. Whereas early on, the car would just be full of music and therefore kids singing away, and harmonies develop naturally, and it's just something you do naturally. So I think that singing is crazy. Just should be doing it all the time. But and I also think that exposing kids to what you're saying about the classical stuff too is, it's amazing how interesting it can be to kids once they actually start to understand what they're hearing.
Totally. Totally. Getting them tapping, getting them moving, getting them a sense of how it all kind of works in a playful kind of way. Like as a guitar teacher, we talk guitar more than we talk music. We talk about this is a C shape on the chord, as opposed to on the piano we're learning this is a triad and these are the notes that are contained in it, and this is what happens when we make it minor. The guitar, we kind of go, all right, we've shifted up a fret, or we whack a capo on it, and we're not really sure about what we're doing musically. It's very parrot fashion. Same with the kind of the boom chick, Travis picking kind of thing. You use a chord shape, do this with your thumb, do this with your fingers, but you're not really looking at whether you're playing, what notes you're actually playing, and how they actually what exists within a chord. And the thing, I've always said, like the guitar, it's hard to learn everything. It's in one key. They always say, learn it in multiple keys. No, as a guitar player, learn everything in one key, because you can do so many of the same things in different positions. On the piano, we play C, and we play C, and we play F, and we, it's whether, because it's very left to right. Guitar's horizontal, vertical, which creates angles. So, but once you have that at your, talking caged or whatever, we can just move that position up. The singer goes, can we move it down half a step? And if you're in G, you got one sharp, and then you go to G flat, you're going to have 6 flats. It's a nightmare, but we just, move it down, move it up. So,
or you become an acoustic player like me, mate, and live by the capo. But people don't know the capo actually just you changes the length of your neck all the time. So you can a G can be a B flat very easy by putting the capo on fret 3. You just sort of move it up and everything like that. So
and I mean, even with recording, I think you guys like Dylan and that, you'd play like a chord progression like a G, C, D, and you might do it in an open position, and then you might capo another part of the fretboard, which will give you different voicings to play the same chords. So, there's some different uses. You can be creative with the capo. The capo does get to me a little bit because of that. I don't like to put people into I'm a guitar player and I can just move it to here. Learn how it works.
But mate, you're more of a technical guitar player. I was always a singer-songwriter who would I'd be learning my scales, then I'd get distracted by turning that into a song. And I'd never really get fully with my scales. I was never a person who could sit down and wail a solo, but I have a pretty good finger picking style I do that's my style, but it's not suitable to walk. I can't walk into a studio and be a session player for anything that's going on, whereas you can do that across the whole spectrum.
And there's nothing wrong with it either, but I think you kind of come from two schools, between what you do and what I do. We probably are coming from that separate, there's nothing wrong with either of them, but people always say, do you write? What do you write? It's like I arrange music more. I'll pick an old tune from the, Grand American Songbook or something and not even arrange it, but just improvise within that framework and that kind of use that as a vessel. I'll play over a blues or I'll whatever. And I wouldn't call it noodling, but it's definitely not something that I would write and then say, well, that's my song. And then 10 years later, I'll play the same song.
Which leans more on the jazz exposure in your side of things. It's more like that, being able to know the technical side of your fretboard, rather than the shape side of your fretboard, and being able to move that more in a much more free thinking style. Whereas, as I say, mine is more of a structured thing around the songs I write and what I do in my, over and over again.
Yeah.
And then once again, it's all music, so it all comes from different ways. And once kids start, they eventually evolve into what they love to do. But mate, I was really just blown away talking to you the other day about how excited you were and how exuberant you were about what your kids are achieving. And I'm like, man, that's my biggest blessing in music was I went to Kedron High School and I had a music teacher called Mary McDonald. And mate, Mary was only a few years older than us as in our sort of senior years. But she helped us set up our first bands we had. We also do the jazz band, the choral group, everything else. She helped us book our first studio sessions. She was teaching music like in class. We were doing like Carole King and James Taylor and all these great sort of singer-songwriters of the 70s.
Yeah, there's Tapestry album.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that was a big one on what she did. And it was her and an English teacher I had, Lynn Pepper, who really awakened me to the excitement of words and how they can be so artistically used. And going through school, if you've got those teachers that inspire you and excited about what they're teaching you in the arts field, it's just such a big advantage to kids. And I was just really, really impressed by your excitement about them the other day, mate. And I just want to say thank you for what you're doing in that space, because that's great.
It's a buzz, man. Like just the music that when they get into actually playing, first you learn to play by yourself so that you can play for people. And first you play by yourself, and then you learn to play with people, and then you learn to play for people. And having that that freedom to move the song around a little bit. There's a lot of stuff like if they're doing. High school kids are doing Toto and Steely Dan, and they want to do some. They'll bust out some Chisel, and and they'll do some great early Aussie rock, and they're doing a few Lenny Kravitz tunes right now, and then they'll warm up with some Hendrix, and they all play keys, they all play guitar. The drummer's amazing, and. Yeah, they work out their harmonies, and they all get together, and they that's what I mean. Like it teaches them about it teaches most importantly how to listen. They got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. It's more important to kind of see what's going on, and and they learn how to sell something. It's one thing just to kind of play something technical, but if people want to feel something, so they learn about putting some projecting into their music, and it's not choreographed. These kids are like, they're into it. They're grooving, they're moving, and they're, they're getting exposed to such a broad, that stuff out of they love their 70s and their 80s kind of stuff, and and all that that Seattle kind of sound that was, the early 90s, the Nirvana and all that kind of Stone Temple Pilots, and it's so good. I feel, the music now. I'm not putting it down because that's what our parents used to say to us, and I'm becoming like my parents used to be. Your music's crap. I'm not saying that it is, but I'm just saying, I think was it like 2006? I think Pro Tools came out. I think was it around then?
Yeah,
from memory, I don't know. And the digital world, and I'm not ancient, neither are you. We're not ancient, but there was a time where I'd have to wash the car, mow the lawn, get me cash, get on me pushy, go to a CD music store and go through, and buy some albums. Usually I'd be in like the jazz section buying music that was, 50 plus years old. But, you'd get a new album and you'd get it and you'd open it up and you got the little, who's playing and the lyrics sometimes are in there. So cool. Now Spotify. Click. It's kind of it's a blessing, but kind of somewhat in disguise, isn't it? There's so much.
I've raised this with a few people I've spoken to recently in these chats that there's a lot of good music coming out now, and there's a lot of good music coming out back then. There's a lot of crap coming out now, and there's a lot of crap coming out back then in the 70s as well. So, for example, the thing is, the crap gets left behind and you forget about it. The good songs live on. But and the same will happen now. The good songs will live on and the crap will get left behind. But the other advantage, exactly what you're saying, that we had growing up in those times was you'd get your album, you had this sort of collection of songs here that you actually lived with for a certain period of time. Then you would hear those tracks being played on certain radio stations or on Rage or on Countdown or whatever. There were certain plays that you kept hearing it. Now, there's like 10,000 songs being released a day through the different platforms, and there's this tsunami of stuff coming at you that you don't get to live that same experience with a collections of songs, or you rarely do. And so it kind of washes over us a lot quicker.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have we, burnt out, classic, Dark Side of the Moon, albums that were just kind of played, burnt them out on repeat, and now we're listening to so much variety. I think I'd say definitely I encourage people to listen to the same stuff over and over and listen to new stuff, but don't do one or the other. Like listen to something new, but continue to listen to what it is that you like on repeat.
And it does make me wonder. There's a whole generation that hasn't had that experience of actually having the album and getting locked into an album. And I wonder if there around the corner there will be a technology that will come out in the new technology forms. But goes back to that a little bit, because it's like a whole generation hasn't experienced that. And I think if they could find a new way of hearing an album with the new technology, or something that does take into that space, it's like a lot of kids coming through now have never seen an old school pub sing-along session, and they're starting to experience it at times, and they can't say, oh, that's something we've never seen before. I think it will come around that there will be something that will take us back to that, because there's so much richness you get out of actually getting to hang on to that album. And you go to a friend's place and you look at what their record collection was, and you kind of got to know their personality.
Yeah, I know. And I asked that the kids, man, have you ever listened to an album? And it's like, it's getting worse. It's not even a song now. It's a 30-second TikTok thing.
Yeah.
It's just, it's like it's a quick commercial on something. The idea of listening to an album, it just doesn't really compute with a lot of people.
I have this hope in the back of my mind that will go around. It's a little bit like, also recently there's been a big revival in the country music stuff and the storytelling in songs. We kind of lost that for some time with especially a lot of the hip hop and rap and the anger and the angst in those songs. We lost that, and there's a generation rediscovering that. And I'm hoping down the track something will be emerged that will allow the next generation to rediscover kind of what the experiences we had with music back in those days.
I get it. Yeah, I get excited about like when you see kids, especially kids, but anybody, when they haven't discovered Bob Dylan yet. They haven't discovered James Taylor yet. They haven't, Gordon Lightfoot, all these great singer-songwriters, and they haven't. They've never listened to Billy Joel. Who's this guy? Well, you're yet to discover that. Yeah. It's as I said, it's a history lesson. You got to go back and forward. But yeah, definitely getting into what we're talking about, just music today, how it's kind of introduced to people, with its.
Well, mate, when you hear this back, you will hear there's a funky thing going on where it sounds like someone's burping in the middle of it all. What's going on? And we probably won't go on too much longer for that reason. But I really appreciate what you've got to say and what you've said about giving some advice to parents on ways to get their kids into music. That excitement that you feel as a teacher, and I think that's so important in kids' life, what they're doing, and I really respect you for that. And then just opening up kids to hear so many things, all different types of music is so good. So, I think we've covered a lot of the points I did want to talk to you about.
Yeah. Get them in school band too. Get little Johnny playing the trombone or the on a triangle, whatever it is. But just get them into school band. They learn about. I don't know what's wrong with me, but it definitely teaches them about organization. It teaches them about time management. It teaches them about, okay, we've got a recital coming up, and we've got this, and I've got to learn my parts, and I've got to learn, and then you've got to put it all together, and you learn about caring for your instrument, because if you're not maintaining your instrument, it's not going to play right, even if you are playing it right. So it teaches you about respecting something. So school band is another thing to really.
That's something we have to make sure as a society we keep fighting for to make sure it happens. I was listening to an interview a while ago on something, I can't remember what it was, with Ed Sheeran, and he was talking about how in the British school systems, like him, Adele, and all those people, they all came up through the public school system, but they had a really good music system. They're taking that out of the education system in the UK.
Yeah, all over. It's happening. It's happening over here too. You see,
It is.
It's, you know, I learn your academic, studies, get your whatever you need to, finish school with some, so you've got opportunities to get a trade or to go to uni or whatever, but keep involved. I always say sport and music, and they're usually the first thing to go, and art. That might not be your career. You might not want to be a professional musician, but I guarantee if you become a doctor or a parent or a mechanic or a social worker, if you play an instrument, if you learn music, you're going to be better at that. It's just going to make you better at being a human.
Enriches your life in every way. Enriches your life.
Sense of humor, it gives you so many things that we need, I think that we're losing. I think, it's sad when it's not respected as much. It's like, oh, you're just a music teacher. Okay, you don't.
I mentioned earlier when I was at school that my teacher helped us booking our first recording session. It was actually a studio at Indooroopilly. It was an under-guy's house, and the guy was a Dr. Peter Ragg. He was a really well-known bass player, jazz bass player around the time, and he had this studio, and he was like a really high-up like surgeon, and he'd be doing these major operations all day, and he'd come home and he'd book in sessions where he'd engineer people playing, and he'd be playing jazz. And he actually put himself through medical school playing jazz in London, jazz clubs in London. And I've met so many like doctors and people like that who their go-to thing for getting away from stress and everything else is playing music.
Yeah, I mean it's a therapy that as I said, like everybody goes, one of your first questions today, which is great. You said, like, what's your fear of, people thinking I can't make a career out of this? That's a piece of an area that, people go, I'm not going to do this because ain't no money in it. There's more to it than money. There's joy that you're going to get from learning and playing music and art and everything. And as I said, it's just going to make it better, I think.
Yeah,
I know.
Mate, that's a great note, and we might wind it up on that. And folks, as I say, when you listen to this, you will hear some funky sounds, but listen to what we're talking about, please, not the funky sounds. And we'll fix it up, and I'll get Nathan on again, and we'll talk a bit more about that, because I think that whole sense of, we get locked up in our industry sometime of it, talking about it just being a commercial industry and forgetting it adds such a richness to our culture all around. And we've got to make sure we keep getting kids coming through learning stuff. So, mate, thank you very much for your time and doing this. Now, you had a long day and you're pretty tired and all that stuff, but I really appreciate it, mate.
All right. No worries. Thank you, Nick.